Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. A 175-year-old church described as a historical treasure and which has links to the royal family has been tragically destroyed in a fire. St Mark's Church in St John's Wood, which is Grade 2 listed, was home to many significant memorials, artefacts and mosaics, and had strong ties to Queen Victoria's son, Prince Leopold, whose tutor was vicar there for around 4 decades. And the Prince himself laid a foundation stone there in 1877. The Reverend Kate Harrison, the current vicar of the church, said the fire had left her absolutely devastated. Now, the Reverend David Ackerman, vicar of St John the Evangelist in Kensal Green, joins me to discuss this further. First of all, thank you for joining us on a Sunday. I know it's your busiest day of the week. Viewers might remember you from the Easter special in which you appeared and you kindly lent us your church. You've experienced damage yourself, great damage, haven't you, at your church, or well, your church has?
Yes, I mean, it's interesting. This morning I stood at the altar, which is a memorial to Father Tipper. And indeed, Father Tipper's ashes are buried underneath. And in 1940, during the Blitz, the church was bombed. And we have the letters, and we have his recollections of what happened. And he said in the morning after the bombing, he walked into the church with a labourer, and much of the roof had gone and the glass had gone.
But people on the radio were showing images now of the church before the fire.
And he cried.
Right.
And so did the labourer. And he said, and the labourer said, "Father, we'll build this up again." And he said, "We did." But of course, he built the church up, and it doesn't look the same. But I'm very conscious of his efforts. And I think the congregation, the people at St Mark's, will be crying, they'll be grieving, and then there'll be that sense of, how do we rebuild this?
And there's also the sense of a reminder that we are the church, isn't there?
Exactly. And this morning, the congregation met, I gather, in the vicarage garden to worship. And again, this morning in my church, I said, the only sense I get of what this might be like is in the first lockdown, some of us gathered in the garden on Easter Day, and we looked over the wall as the bells rang and the church was locked. And we gathered in a garden, and I read that gospel about the first resurrection morning being in a garden. And of course, when it's all gone, when your church isn't there anymore, I think it takes you back to the origins, to the beginnings, to what the church is about and how you rebuild.
Yeah. And we just saw some of the mosaics there that have probably been unrecoverable from this fire. There's so much treasure lost. Father, what would you say to people? I've seen a lot of comments online of people saying, well, you know, the vicar there used #ComeOut and backed Sandy Toksvik's argument of revisionist approach to the gospel. Could this be divine judgment? You know, God will not be mocked.
I don't. I sometimes think, well, I think God's got better things to do, actually, than do these things. I think that, you know, again, in that whole debate about human sexuality and all those things, there are very many churches that differ on these things, and I don't think we're seeing sort of certain ones going up in smoke and certain things not. And again, I think sometimes this is the thing that at the end of all this might just be electrical. It might be something that you know, so simple, so small, that causes all this.
Yeah.
And I suspect, again, when your church isn't there anymore, I think it does take you back to the very beginning, and you think, what is the church for?
Well, let's talk about that. So what will the community be doing now that they don't have this physical building?
Again, I suspect there'll be many people around that church who might not have gone very often.
So the wider community?
Because it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
In a sense, they notice what they've lost. And we see this so often in parishes all over the country, that there is huge amount of cherishing of churches. And it doesn't mean people go there very often. The moment you say it might not be there anymore, I think, well, the day they say, well, no, we want this.
Yeah.
And I noticed this morning, particularly, a lot of people came to church this morning. And I don't know, but it might be that some of them thought, my church is there, and I want to be there, and cherish what we've got and celebrate what we've got.
Yeah. So it's a good reminder for people to get to church.
Oh, absolutely.
Is this recoverable? Is the damage too extensive?
Well, again, I've only seen pictures, and it looks pretty, extensively damaged. And again, the church, we don't live 175 years ago, and there's no doubt there will be debates about what sort of church should there be there.
Oh, yes.
A church that was built for the world 175 years ago, we're different. I mean, profoundly, a church is the same thing. But no doubt there'll be discussions about how does this church, how does a new church, how does a reconstructed church serve the community around it?
We don't make them like we used to. In fact, I don't even know if we have the skills to create churches like we used to.
Every time there's a fire, you rediscover skills.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you very much for your analysis. That was the Reverend David Ackerman, Vicar of St John the Evangelist in Kensal Green.